My name is Zoe Walker. I'm the founder of Mirapath Technologies, a startup I once considered my life's work. Sleepless nights on the office couch, design sketches scribbled on diner napkins, pitch meetings with investors when I had only $27 in my account. All of it led me here, the 42nd floor of a high-rise in downtown Austin, where my name used to be etched on the glass door, CEO and co-founder. I didn't cry when I read that message. Expect a call from the company lawyer. No sweetheart, no explanation, just a cold, clinical command. As if I were a shift worker being rotated out, not the person who laid the first brick of this company. The sender was my mother, Irene Walker, our CFO, who once told me she'd only serve as a temporary advisor after my father passed. I stared at the message, hoping it might vanish if I blinked, but it didn't. It just sat there, quiet and brutal, like a verdict. Amber's name was CC'd, of course. Amber, my younger sister, was placed on the executive board after graduating with an average MBA, never having gone through a single financial quarter of real pressure. And now, somehow, she was the COO, though I couldn't recall ever agreeing to that. I took a deep breath, resisting the urge to throw my phone out the window. That morning, the city of Austin looked like it had been draped in a thin sheet of fog, beautiful, but blurred. It mirrored how I felt, dazed, but certain I'd just been stabbed from behind. No one looked up when I stood. No one asked why I'd been sitting motionless for an hour by the window. They already knew. They always knew things before I did. And me? The one who once stood proudly at press events, launched our first product, smiled wide as I signed our first major deal. I was the last to be told that I no longer existed in the room I had built. I walked into my office, closed the door, and opened the bottom drawer. There was a yellow envelope I'd kept hidden there for over 2 months, a contract I hadn't yet signed with a private equity firm in Chicago. I'd seen it as a just-in-case option if things ever got too suffocating. I never imagined I'd actually need it. Until this morning. I didn't open it right away, just sat, placing my hands on the oak desk where so many late-night coffee cups had left rings, where even a few tears had fallen during failed fundraising rounds. I used to believe that if I just tried harder, if I proved I was good enough, my mother would see me as a true leader, not just a kid with ambition. I was wrong. I had no reason to stay in that office anymore. Everything I believed in had been rotting long before I realized. The problem wasn't that they cut me out. It was that they had planned it all while making me smile for the cameras, speak at conferences, and carry them through a financial crisis that only I had stayed late to navigate. This wasn't a misstep, it was a calculated removal. I pulled out the envelope and placed it on the desk. This time there was no hesitation. I had my answer. They didn't need me. And I no longer needed to beg for a seat in a company that bore my name but had someone else's heartbeat. When I signed the contract to sell my 51% stake, my hand didn't tremble. I used to think my mother, Ireneized, joined Mirapath simply because she didn't want me to handle everything alone after Dad passed. I was 29 then, and the company was just a name without a logo, headquartered in a rented apartment in East Austin, with secondhand computers and a whiteboard wedged between the kitchen and living room. She said, "I just want to help you rebuild the piece your father left unfinished. I won't touch any executive authority." And I believed her. At first, Irene truly stepped back. She handled paperwork, opened doors with banks, and assisted with investor meetings that leaned heavily on finance. I was still the one mapping the direction, hiring staff, designing products, pitching on funding calls that dragged on until 9 p.m. We functioned like a slightly offbeat but working machine. But then, slowly, things started to shift. When I turned 31, Amber moved back from Denver after dropping out of her graduate program. I remember clearly the first day she walked into the office, sleek blonde hair, white blazer dress, a flawless smile. I hugged her tightly, thinking I'd found a bit of our childhood again, when we used to run barefoot in the backyard, not yet competing for Mom's attention. But that joy didn't last. Irene never asked my opinion when she brought Amber in as executive assistant. "It's just for her to learn the ropes," she said. But within 6 months, Amber started showing up in strategy meetings, replying to internal emails on my behalf, and eventually, without warning, spoke in my place at a conference in Dallas. I was the one originally invited. I confronted them. My mother looked at me with a calm, piercing gaze and said, "Don't be so sensitive. Amber's helping you. You should know how to leverage young energy." I was 31. I had founded an entire company, and I was being told to leverage youth by someone who had never once endured a payroll deadline or a 3 a.m. server crash. I started noticing my name quietly disappearing from CC's. An important report on the Asian market was sent directly to Amber, bypassing me. I wasn't invited to a board meeting, but Amber's name was introduced first. I later discovered that someone had been quietly shifting all my joint meetings to times when I was traveling, making me look consistently unavailable without reason. When I pushed back, Amber simply shrugged. "I thought you liked working independently. You always said you didn't need someone to manage your calendar." She knew every detail, every habit of mind, and she used it to push me out. I don't know when Amber gained access to the CRM system where all our key client data lived. I don't know when she started speaking directly with the product engineering team, the team I had worked closest with for years. But the moment that broke me was a Monday morning when I saw my name replaced by hers on the message from leadership section of our website. No announcement, no permission. I called my mother. She didn't pick up. 2 hours later, I received an email from the legal department. Effective immediately, Zoe Walker's system access has been suspended as part of ongoing internal restructuring. Restructuring? I was the founder. Who gave them the right to restructure anything without me? The next morning, I rushed to the office, but my access card no longer worked. And then, in the very building I spent 3 full years designing from scratch, a new security guard smiled politely and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. We were informed that you're no longer internal staff." I stood there, facing the locked glass doors, behind which the Mirapath logo glowed bright on the wall. And I understood. They had planned this. A silent takeover. No alarms, no warnings, just the proper paperwork to legally erase me from the very company I gave life to. I could barely breathe. But when I caught my reflection in the glass, not angry, not shaken, I knew one thing. They had been playing this hand behind my back for a long time, and now I would start playing by my own rules. No notice, no compromise. This time, I didn't need anyone to see me. I would let them realize, once it was already too late. I left the Mirapath building before the sun had even begun to rise. The Uber I'd called was waiting across the street, but I didn't get in right away. I stood quietly beneath a traffic light, looking back at the office facade, the place that once embodied the dream I had nurtured since I was 24. Now it was nothing more than a polished shell for a power game in which I no longer played the lead. On the ride back to my apartment in East Riverside, I reached into my bag and pulled out a neatly clipped folder. The contract to transfer 51% of my shares. 3 months earlier, sensing the temperature in the company turning cold, I had quietly initiated talks with the buyers. Crescent Oak Capital, a well-known investment firm specializing in acquiring and restructuring family-run companies that showed signs of internal decay. I didn't need the money. Mirapath was still profitable, I still received quarterly dividends, but I knew if I didn't prepare an exit plan early, the day would come when I'd be pushed off the board without even a single piece to move. And that day was today. Crescent Oak wasn't interested in the IoT devices we manufactured. They weren't impressed by the mobile app Mirapath once proudly marketed as revolutionary for home connectivity. What they wanted was the power structure behind it. The one Irene and Amber had turned into a glass cage. Transparent, glittering, but airtight to any dissenting voice. When I sent my final message to my mother, just 2 words. "I understand." I knew I wouldn't get a reply. She had never truly answered me, only handed down decisions, imposed her will, and expected my compliance, like I was still a well-behaved child. At 10 a.m., I walked into the office of Delaney Fox, Crescent Oaks legal representative, located on the sixth floor of a weathered brick building in Austin's financial district. No signage, no receptionist. Just a brass plaque that read Fox Advisory Group and a heavy oak door. Delaney, mid-40s, sharp and composed, motioned for me to sit with a glance firm enough to make anyone lower their defenses. "Are you ready, Zoe?" "More than ever," I said, and placed the folder on the glass table. We reviewed the terms. Mirapath had been valued at $58 million. I was selling 51% for $29.6 million, of which I'd receive only $10 million in cash. The rest would be held as preferred stock in the new structure. I didn't care about the numbers. What I needed was separation. I signed. Each stroke of the pen was steady, not bitter, just the calm resolve of someone who had been discounted one time too many. Once the deal was notarized, Delaney folded the folder shut and looked at me. "They're not going to see this coming." "I don't need them to think," I said. "I just need them to know I'm no longer beneath them." By 3 p.m., my phone buzzed for the first time. Amber. By the time I finished steeping my second pot of tea, the number had climbed to 14. My mother, my sister, the accounting department, and then numbers I didn't recognize. Not a single apology, just chaos. At 8 p.m., I received a text from Delaney. They just tried transferring $1.9 million from the company's contingency fund. The system blocked it. They don't know control has changed yet. I didn't laugh. I didn't feel triumphant. Just a subtle weight slipping off my shoulders. I glanced at my phone. 37 missed calls, 18 messages. None of them started with, "Zoe, can we talk?" or "I'm sorry, sis." Every one was a variation of the same panicked scream. "What is this? Why is my account locked? What the hell did you do?" I put the phone down, poured another cup of tea, and sank into the armchair. Outside the window, traffic along I-35 flowed as if nothing had happened. And really, to the world, nothing monumental had. Just one woman, after 11 years of building a dream, had finally refused to let anyone else write her ending. And I still owned 49%. Exactly enough to watch it all fall apart. From silence. At 9 a.m. the next morning, I was making coffee when I received an email from Delaney. The subject line was short and sharp. "Urgent meeting, irregular transfer detected." Less than 3 minutes later, I was seated in the conference room on the 8th floor of Fox Advisory. The large screen displayed a transaction log broken down to the minute, in bold red text, outlined for emphasis. $2,420,000, attempted wire transfer to Novapath Ltd.C. Cayman Islands, status, flagged and blocked. Delaney didn't look at me. She just tapped each word out evenly. Novapath was incorporated 6 months ago. No business activity. Listed director, Tanner Rhodes, former assistant to Amber. I didn't react right away. I simply leaned back, eyes locked on the logo of the shell company, as if trying to measure just how clever they thought they were. "When was the transfer attempted?" 2:16 a.m., Delaney replied, right after Mirapath received the shareholder update. "They panicked," I murmured, "and did the stupidest thing they could." She nodded. "Instinctive reaction. Drain the funds before the controls lock in." I recalled a spring cocktail party 2 years ago when Amber had half-joked to a group of startup friends, "If Zoe ever burns out, I'll just sweep the company cash and open a spa in Barbados." They all laughed. I did too. I thought she was just playing the sassy little sister role. Turns out, it was an early draft of the real plan. Delaney switched the screen to a scanned internal email. From Irene to Amber. The subject, Phase 2 strategy, URG. The body, barely a sentence. "Make sure no one in the team catches this. If needed, execute in one go." I clenched my fists. Those short lines hit not my pride, but a memory. A memory of the woman who once taught me how to open my first bank account, who used to bike me to school every summer of 6th grade, who held me when Dad passed suddenly from a stroke. Now she was the one orchestrating a financial sweep before control could be stripped from her. Delaney opened a new folder. We found two more related accounts, Blue Glen Ventures and Harbor 8 LLC, both registered by Rhodes and a mid-level finance employee. Total transfers this year, roughly $2.4 million, disguised as strategic consulting fees. I froze. Strategic consulting? Mirapath only had 3 approved consulting firms, every contract negotiated by me last year, so what were these fees? They made fabricated contracts and processed the payments themselves? Delaney nodded. And each amount was kept under $300,000 to avoid mandatory audit triggers, but once our team flagged the bank system, the transactions were frozen. I closed my eyes for a few seconds, took a long, quiet breath. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even angry. I just felt exhausted. Like all these years of holding up what I believed was family had finally collapsed, brought down by the very people I let in through the front door. We'll need your written consent to proceed with filing for financial fraud, Delaney said. I'll sign, I replied, but not yet. She tilted her head. Why not? I smiled faintly. I want to see what else they'll try while they still think they've got options. Because I knew my mother. Irene Walker didn't lose easily, and when cornered, she always reverted to her favorite tactic, distorting the truth until the victim looked like the traitor. I stood, picked up the copy of the blocked transfer record. Before leaving, I turned to Delaney. If they try to push more funds through alternate accounts, can your system flag it in real time? Yes. We're running early detection protocols now. I nodded. Good. Because I bet this game's not over yet. They still think I'll fold at the first fake apology. On the way home, my phone buzzed again. Ember, 3 missed calls, followed by a text. I'm sorry if you felt hurt. Can we talk like family? I stared at it, eyes dry. No response. I wasn't part of that so-called family anymore, and this time they would learn. Money doesn't save an empire that's already rotted at its core. 3 days after the $2.4 million transfer was blocked, I received a call from Julian, the financial investigator from Crescent Oak. His voice was steady and fast, as if slowing down might cause him to lose control of the data storm they'd just uncovered. Zoe, we need you to review some files. It looks like the plan to remove you from Mirapath started nearly 8 months ago. I wasn't surprised, but my throat still tightened. At the Fox Advisory Office, I sat in front of 3 wide monitors, watching files populate one after another, emails, payroll logs, financial statements, and most notably a series of consulting contracts signed while I had been traveling abroad. Each document bore a signature, either Irene Walker or Amber Walker. Julian opened one email titled Personnel Structure Adjustment Roadmap Confidential, sent by Irene to someone named Craig Mullen, a freelance attorney who had been quietly involved in a few minor projects for the company. The contents read, Step 1. Reduce Zoe's actual involvement in project oversight. Start in March. Step 2. Gradually revoke her system access. Avoid triggering a reaction. Step 3. Review the founding agreement. Remove any preferred share protections tied to Zoe if they exist. Step 4. Prepare a media response if necessary. Craig. Have an NDA ready to deploy when needed. Below that was a short note from Amber. What about the gray budget? Still hiding it under consulting? Mom, don't let the June wire be visible. The company name is too obvious. I leaned back, my heart slow but heavy. What I had once brushed off as intuition was in fact a strategy, and I was the target they had identified from the start. Julien played an audio recording captured from a Zoom meeting saved by a former IT employee now working with Crescent Oak. In the recording, Amber said, she really thinks she's irreplaceable, but while she's off sketching those side projects, I already closed 3 new contracts. Trust me. Zoe might be brilliant, but she's not the one who knows how to keep a company within the family. Irene's voice followed, flat and cold. She thinks loyalty's an asset, but if it's too soft, we'll need to replace it. My neck tensed. Loyalty isn't a flaw, but in their eyes it was a resource to exploit and discard. The next piece of evidence was a statement labeled external consulting expenses, totaling 17 payments from February to July, each ranging between $80,000 and $280,000. All payments were routed to hastily registered Delaware companies with no operational footprint, described as strategic market expansion consultants. Another Word document was labeled plainly, silent campaign file for IW only. Inside, just 2 lines. Keep Zoe out of all restructuring meetings. If questioned, say she's occupied with peripheral projects, non-essential to core operations. I let out a dry chuckle. Peripheral, they used the very word I once embraced when I stepped back a little to protect myself from burnout, to justify erasing me from the agenda. I turned to Julian. Can we consolidate all of this into one file? Already done. Codename, Atlas/drop point. Want a hard copy or external drive? External drive. And I want a second backup. Compressed, encrypted, and stored somewhere I choose. Careful, Zoe. If they find out you're holding this. I cut him off. They should know. Because from now on, every word they've said, every signature they've made, comes with consequences. I got home just before 6 p.m. Before heading inside, I paused at the mailbox. Inside a large envelope with no return address was a copy of the internal HR file I'd previously been denied access to at Mirapath. Taped to the back was a handwritten note. The handwriting, unmistakable. You were the only one who stayed in the conference room after 9 p.m. I remember that. Don't let them forget. No name, but I knew who it was. Noah, the former project assistant I had mentored in the company's early days. I stared at the note. My heart softened, but my eyes sharpened. That night, I reopened my laptop, tucked the external drive into a hidden drawer under the desk, and created a new folder. I named it Legacy_proof. Because if there's anything worth protecting to the very end, it's not the equity or the title, it's the truth. And this time I won't leave the fight until every one of their cards is forced into the light. That night I couldn't sleep, even with the doors locked, the phone turned off, and the curtains drawn tight in my East Riverside apartment. My mind kept spinning. File names, notes, voices from the recordings looping in my head like a dull blade, dragging slowly through trust. I brewed my 3rd cup of peppermint tea, hoping the scent of herbs might calm me. But when I opened the drawer for a spoon, I found something I had forgotten. A small mahogany box, one corner slightly chipped. It had sat on my father, Arthur Walker's desk for more than a decade, right beside the family photo frame and his silver pocket watch. After he passed suddenly from a stroke, Irene cleared out everything. Except this box. She left it for me without explanation. I opened the lid. Inside were a few old notes, a movie ticket stub from 2004, and at the bottom, an unmarked black USB drive. My heart pounded. I didn't remember ever seeing it, didn't know what it was, but something in me said this was my father, whispering again in his own way. I plugged the USB into my laptop. One folder appeared, Legacy_AW. I opened it and my breath caught. Inside was an 18-minute video dated October 12th, 2016, 1 week before my father collapsed. I hit play. The screen lit up with his image, seated in his old office, sleeves rolled, lines deep across his tired face. He looked straight into the camera, voice low and steady, every word deliberate. If you're watching this, Zoe, then I guess things aren't how you thought they'd be. My grip on the chair tightened, my body rigid. I wasn't perfect, but I know Mirapath exists because of you. Not because of money, not because of the structure your mother brought in, because of you. You built it from scratch. I just followed your lead. He paused, took a breath. Your mother? Irene always wanted to control everything. She said I was weak for letting you make decisions. But I don't regret it. And if she, or anyone else, tries to erase your role, then use what's on this drive. The video ended with a long look, his eyes red but unwavering. I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. The screen went black, but a new fracture opened in my heart, not from betrayal, but from the feeling of being protected by the one person I thought had left too soon. I opened the next folder, records _ 2014 _ 2016. A series of PDF files, scanned invoices, contracts, emails, proving that during Mirapath's earliest days, when no one believed in it, when no investor would touch us, I had been the one handling everything. Even the first contracts with North Texas distributors were in my name, not my father's. But Irene had them reissued later, for legal clarity during expansion. Then I found a Word file titled Resignation _ draft.xx, a resignation letter my father had written but never submitted. One paragraph read, I, Arthur Walker, voluntarily withdraw from my position as Director of Project Operations as of November. I recognize that the creation, management, and development of Mirapath's core product are entirely the result of Zoe Walker's leadership, and I believe that without her, this company would not exist today. Not a single word was exaggerated. Every sentence cut like a razor through the narrative Irene and Amber had constructed. That I was just the PR face, that I had emotional vision, while they were the operational backbone. I saved everything to 3 separate hard drives, each encrypted. One I locked in the apartment safe, one I sent to Delaney, and one I mailed to a place Irene would never expect, the editorial desk at Texas Business Weekly, under the sender name A.W. Archive. Not to destroy them, but to remind them, no one gets to erase the person who laid the first brick. I sat back in my small kitchen, the yellow light glowing over a cup of cold tea. For the first time in months, I leaned back and closed my eyes, not to retreat but to prepare, because I knew the real war was just beginning. And this time, I wasn't alone, not when I still had my father beside me, even if only through a single video. On the morning of the final hearing, I arrived at the Travis County Courthouse in a navy blue suit and the low-heeled shoes my father once bought me. The same day he said, "You don't need to stand taller than anyone, you just need to stand steadier." Across the aisle, Irene and Amber were already seated. My mother wore a cream blazer, her face caked with makeup, eyes refusing to meet mine. Amber looked noticeably thinner, but still wore the smugness she'd carried throughout the years. I kept stepping aside. Their legal team consisted of 3 well-spoken, seasoned professionals, but none of them had evidence. I had plenty. We began with our legal report, proof that I had been removed from the executive board without notice, without proper vote, in direct violation of the founding charter. Then came the compiled financial records. Over 200 irregular transactions, totaling more than $3 million, most funneled to entities with no legal standing. I sat still, watching it all unfold like a film I already knew by heart, except this time, I wasn't being forced to play a supporting role. When we played the video my father had left behind, the courtroom fell silent. Arthur Walker appeared on the screen, seated in his office, sleeves rolled up, his voice hoarse but firm. He said, "If anyone ever questions whether Zoe built Mirapath from the ground up, let me confirm it myself, based on what I witnessed." I heard Amber swallow hard. Irene leaned toward her attorney, whispering something, but the steadiness in her tone was gone. The silence in the courtroom wasn't dramatic. It was simply the truth, returned to its rightful place. The final piece of evidence came from a recording provided by Noah Pacer, the former assistant. In it, Amber laughed during a closed-door meeting and said, "She'll never see it coming. Zoe always thinks the best of people. By the time she figures it out, the shares will already be transferred." 2 days later, the judge issued the formal ruling. Zoe Walker was removed from executive leadership in violation of internal governance protocol with indicators of deliberate exclusion. She will be reinstated as a recognized co-founder reflected in all legal and media records. All asset transfers, fund withdrawals, or consulting contracts executed under the company's name by Miss Irene Walker and Miss Amber Walker are to be suspended pending further investigation. The room was so quiet I could hear Amber's pen fall to the floor. My mother didn't speak. For the first time in her life, she had no words left to reshape the narrative. Their attorney requested a final statement. The judge denied it. The court has sufficient evidence. Any attempt at redemption now does not alter the nature of the misconduct. I stood up. I didn't bow. I didn't thank anyone. I turned toward the shareholder board seated at the back of the room. The same people who once treated me like a ghost. I looked each of them in the eye and said, "I'm not asking for pity. I'm reclaiming what I invested here. Time, intellect, and youth. Titles are not gifts. They're earned and affirmed by truth." No one replied, but I caught a flicker in some of their eyes. Quiet acknowledgement. That afternoon, Crescent Oak's legal team escorted me back to Mirapath's headquarters. For the first time in nearly 8 months, I passed through the main lobby without being stopped by security. My name had been restored to the leadership plaque. Quietly, no ribbon cutting. But this time I requested one small line beneath it. Co-founder, visionary architect, reaffirmed November 14th. Reaffirmed. Not given back, not forgiven, reaffirmed, exactly as it always should have been. A few hours later, I received an email from a reporter at the Austin Ledger, asking if I wanted to make a public statement about the verdict. I responded simply, I didn't beat anyone, I just refused to be erased. And that was enough. 2 weeks after the court ruling, I received a package from the law firm representing Irene and Amber. A thick envelope, smooth to the touch, sent via priority mail, like they were trying to wrap an apology in prestige. Inside was a settlement offer. It came in 3 parts: a $5 million cash payout, a dignified resignation statement from Irene, and a 10-year NDA forbidding me from ever mentioning the incident on any public platform, social media, press, or even corporate records. At the bottom, the same familiar language. Not to forget, but to allow everyone to move forward. A polished way of saying, stay silent and disappear. I folded the pages, set them on the table, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and stepped onto the balcony. The December morning air in Austin carried the scent of pine resin and cold mist, but it wasn't sharp enough to make me shiver. For the first time in years, I felt something absolute. I owed no one anything anymore. Not an apology, not silence, and certainly not my signature. I declined. That evening, I sat down at my computer, opened a new document, and began to write. When family is no longer a safe place, we build a new home, out of truth. A public letter from Zoe Walker, co-founder of Mirapath Technologies. I told the whole story, from scribbling my first ideas on diner napkins to the moment my access badge stopped working at the building I helped design. No melodrama, no tears, just the truth, each chapter, each detail, accompanied by dates and evidence drawn from the now public court records. I published the letter on an independent blog. No PR team, no ads, no branding. Within 3 hours, it had been shared over 42,000 times. By the next morning, my inbox was flooded. Half the messages came from former Mirapath employees who had been pushed out for not aligning with the new leadership culture. The other half came from strangers, founders, students, engineers, nurses, teachers. Every message echoed the same line. Thank you for not staying silent. And then, one message made me stop cold. From Noah. My former assistant who had been forced off the core project before leaving entirely. If you ever plan to build again, don't forget I still have the key to the first print room. I didn't cry, but my chest tightened as if someone had tied the final knot on a closing chapter, then gently let go. 3 months later, in an old manufacturing building on the outskirts of Round Rock, a former electronics warehouse was signed over to a newly formed nonprofit, the Forge Founders Initiative, a space for incubating startups led by young women in tech, especially those who had been sidelined or underestimated by the very systems they served. There's no title on my office door, no nameplate, no gold plaques. but on the wall next to the entrance, encased in glass, hangs my father's old hammer. Underneath it, engraved words: "Not everyone who swings a hammer destroys. Some are here to rebuild from the wreckage." Amber never reached out again. Irene sent a short email on Christmas Eve. "If you've found peace, I'm glad." I didn't respond. Peace doesn't come from well wishes. It comes from choosing to live truthfully, even when someone once taught you to whisper in order to be accepted. I never returned to Mirapath. I didn't need to. They could keep the office, the name, the brand. I kept my voice. And this time, I'm not letting anyone else write the next chapter. I'm holding the pen. And I know exactly how the first page begins, with me, and those who never forgot, who held the hammer first. Zoe's story is a powerful reminder that silence isn't always noble. Sometimes it's how others erase you from what you helped build. When she refused to trade truth for money and fake redemption, she reclaimed more than her name. She created space for those once pushed aside. In real life, there are moments when standing up isn't about revenge, but about saying, "I was here, I built this, and I deserve to be heard." What would you have done in Zoe's place? Would you stay silent or speak out when your own family turns against you? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family, truth, and self-worth.